Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Faith and Finance Forum, presented to you by Catholic Finance Advisors and underwritten and sponsored by Aquinas Wealth Advisors. We're really pleased to have you today. We have an excellent guest lined up, Nigel Salina, coming to us from Trinidad. Do I have that right, Nigel?
Absolutely correct.
Oh, good. Welcome, my friend. This is great. Let's open up with a quick prayer, and then I'll introduce you to the audience. In the name
Sure.
of the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Our Lady of Guadalupe, pray
Pray.
for us. Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Well, Nigel, it's so good to see you, my friend. You are such an interesting guest. We wanted to have you on for a long time, and we're going to cover a lot of territory right here. You're coming to us from Trinidad in the Caribbean, where you're based and where you do a lot of business, but you certainly have global reach all around the world, including here in the United States. This is going to be a fun one. Let me introduce you to our audience a little bit. Nigel Salina is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and global social impact leader. He is well known for his record-shattering performance at the Caribbean's largest insurer. Nigel was appointed chairman and CEO of the global arm of the Caribbean's largest conglomerate in 2007. Over a 5-year period, he led a team whose performance was unparalleled. He is the chairman and founder, Global Business Leadership Forum Limited, an international corporation focused on global business, connecting leaders and corporations across diverse industries in different geographic locations. He is also the chairman and founder of Globus Energy Group and Globus REI. Nigel is an international consultant with relationships at the highest levels in both politics and business. He works closely with the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, CARICOM, HBCUs, African Union, as well as a number of other projects. He is leading a major initiative on clinical trials across Africa and the Caribbean after leading a number of projects on vaccine confidence and equity. He hosts leadership forums, conferences, and events across the Americas, Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. Nigel is also involved in various philanthropic activities across the globe. He led a global private sector response after the devastating hurricane seasons in 2017 and 2019. He is also the project leader and director of a major Caribbean security initiative. And we could probably go much further than that, my friend, but we only have so much time. Anyway, it's so good to have you on. How are you doing today?
It's great to be here, John, and I'm doing fine. I'm here in sunny Trinidad and Tobago, enjoying the weather and plugging away, working hard at it.
And for our guests that haven't had the privilege of visiting Trinidad and Tobago, it's basically heaven on earth, right? I mean, it's a really beautiful place.
So I would say it's a twin island state. So one is Trinidad, which is the commercial hub. So you have a lot of business taking place in Trinidad. We have a very active energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago, a very active manufacturing sector. And I would refer to Trinidad as the financial, energy, industrial capital of the Caribbean. So that's on one end of the spectrum. But on the other side, you have Tobago, which is right next door, just 20-minute flight. So you would see a painting at the back here. That's actually a jetty in Tobago, and Tobago is the complete opposite. It's laid back, white sandy beaches, beautiful water, and it's the place to go and relax. So it's really a contrast between the both islands.
So you get the best of all worlds. You have, a major commercial center, an industrial center, a place of business, and then you have a place where you can relax and have fun. One island over, right?
Yeah, so a lot of people go to wind down and for relaxation in Tobago because Trinidad is very much like some of the major cities that you have in the US. A lot of activity is buzzing with activity and commerce, business, trade, etc.
Wonderful. Well, Nigel, we've gone over your professional profile a little bit. Tell us a little bit about you. Where did you grow up? What was your family like? Any personal anecdotes you'd like to share with the audience?
Sure, sure. So I grew up in an obscure village in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's in the middle of the rainforest. And when I was growing up, it was a rural area. It still continues to be a rural area, but back in the day, we had things like donkey carts. We also had not many vehicles, and to get to the main commercial area, away from where I grew up. It took a 30-minute drive in a really, what you would refer to, it's in a valley, rustic village. And there's a bit of history there. It was, the name of the place is Lopino. And Lopino was named after Comte de Lopino, who came in from, he was fleeing the French Revolution, came to Santo Domingo, and then came to Trinidad, traveled to Trinidad, and settled in that area where he had a plantation. So this is almost 300 years ago. And he also had slaves in that area. So it was really a plantation, a cocoa plantation, agricultural area. And he settled there. So the place is beautiful. It's surrounded by mountains, and it's in the middle of the rainforest. So that's the area where I grew up in Trinidad.
And I'm recalling your family has entrepreneurship in its blood. Do I have that right?
So my father was a hardworking, he had a cocoa estate, and my mother was also, she was a seamstress, an excellent seamstress, and they were hard workers, and they did everything to really lift us up, our family. And what kept us together is our faith. Our mother had a strong, she had a strong faith, an ardent Catholic, if you want to use that term. And my father's family was the same. He may not have been as religious as my mother was initially, but then he also became very religious. So what really kept us together more than anything else is, I would say, is our faith, which I still continue and to follow today. And I am also an ardent Catholic,
Talk to us a little bit about that. What's your faith journey been like?
So my mother would have been the big influence, and then we had a strong parish priest. So the parish was, the main center was about a half an hour away, and we had these outstations. So we would have been an outstation, and there was this dynamic priest who came, and he was a great influence in my life. And then out of that, I went to Bible school for some time, and then I joined a community here in Trinidad. The name of the community is Living Water Community, a very dynamic community, which was led by two women. And out of that community, a number of priests came out of that community, including the current Archbishop, not only of Port of Spain and Trinidad, but he's also Archbishop of a few islands, surrounding islands also. So he came out of that community, and we actually, at one stage, we lived in the same house. So he is one of my mentors. So after coming out of my background with my family, I joined this community, spent 7 years there full time, and 3 years out of that time, I was a missionary.
Wow, what was it like serving as a missionary? Tell us about that.
Excellent experience. I served in 3 small islands, St. Martin, Sabre, which it's just about 1,200 people in Sabre, and then St. Eustatius, which was just over 2,000 people. That was an incredible experience. It's an experience that I will not exchange for anything else. And I would say it was not only an uplifting experience. At times you would have challenges also, but I would also say that it was great for formation.
Nigel, this is really extraordinary. This is very interesting. So, I mean, your faith has always been a big drive of your life, and it sounds like in your family it was about faith, family, and hard work. Those are your family's principles, right?
Absolutely. And I would tell you, I grew up in it was a family of 10. It's now 7 of us, but we have all maintained a strong faith. And as a matter of fact, every Thursday we get together, we have a prayer meeting, and we also invite some of other extended family members and friends. So every Thursday, about 30 of us get together virtually for a prayer meeting.
Incredible. So the Catholic Church is pretty strong in Trinidad and Tobago, right?
Yes, so the Catholic Church would have played a major role in education. So a lot of the leaders, and we've had great leaders coming out of Trinidad, who have gone to other parts of the world, but they would have gone through the Catholic education system. So the Catholic Church has been a major influence in Trinidad and Tobago, but also produced a lot of leaders, including prime ministers and presidents.
Remarkable. Nigel, just last question on the personal side. You're married, you have children. Tell us a little about your family.
So I have four children and a beautiful wife. You know, it's the center of obviously, my faith comes first, my relationship with God, but my family is also, it will go, as you would say, faith, my relationship, and then I would say with my family. My wife has been a real bedrock, an ally, a supporter, and my best friend. And then we have four children, and those four children are really, I would refer to them as the center of our universe.
So beautiful. This is great. Well, Nigel, we could talk about faith and family with you all day, and we are going to touch about that in a little bit. But I want the audience to get to know just the sheer breadth and scope of your professional journey, which is just truly remarkable. Tell us a little bit about your early career. What were your first couple jobs like? What did you focus on when you were young, coming up as a professional?
So I started off with attending Bible school, as I indicated, and then I joined this community, Living Water community. And I should say that community, it's Catholic in its origins and really rooted in the Catholic faith. However, that community serves people of all religions, all ethnicities in Trinidad and Tobago, and also other parts of the Caribbean. You know, there's a strong presence in Barbados, St. Lucia, and that community actually traveled to Russia at the fall of the, and I was carded to go to Russia in 92 with the community. I didn't make it, or 93, I think it was, but we spent 3 years in Russia after the fall of communism back then, in the 90s, early 90s. But that community has many organizations that that is into social work. So for there are centers for drug rehab center, center for persons who have HIV, another center for persons who are terminally ill with cancer, then one for homeless boys, homeless people in general, where every day about 200 homeless people would come for meals, both breakfast and lunch. And you also have an area where they could take a bath, change of clothing, etc. Those are just a few of the many outreach or social ministries of the community. So I started working there when I lived in the community for 7 years. So that was really my first job. And then I went to the missions, came back, and decided I was going to take a break. Then I took a role in a sales organization. Then I joined the largest insurance company in the Caribbean, which was a group of about 70 companies operating in 34 plus, maybe 35 countries, with 70 companies within the group. So the asset base was about $17 billion. And I worked there, started off really, I would say in a sales position, but very quickly became an executive and then a director of the company. I became a director and then the CEO of the global arm of that conglomerate. And what I was charged with doing is really growing the business internationally. Although we were in 34 countries, we had a lot of plans for going into other countries and in other industries. But the 4 main areas would have been real estate, energy, manufacturing, and finance.
Excellent. So Nigel, you started out in the sales role and you quickly moved up into the executive ranks and ultimately the governance level. What do you attribute your success to at that early age?
I would say faith, again, and faith plays an important role. So every step that I make, I certainly consult with the Father, the Trinity. I would consult with the Trinity, and I would say faith. And I don't want to make it sound simplistic. It's really a fact. So I spend a lot of time in prayer. So faith is an important part of that. The other thing is hard work. I'm a hard worker. So my work ethic, I would work hard. And when I'm also put 100% behind anything I'm doing. And then I would also refer to myself as being innovative and creative. I don't take no for an answer and always find a way to get to that place where I want to get to the goals or the objectives that I set out.
Brilliantly said. So Nigel, when a lot of Americans think of the Caribbean, They think of beaches, drinks with umbrellas in them, cruising, all the beautiful tourism and recreational opportunities in your region of the world. And we don't want to sell those short. Those are incredible, and we all enjoy those. I'm sure you enjoy them too. But there's so much else going on in terms of the markets and the economy of the Caribbean well beyond that, right?
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit more about that. What were some of the other big sectors in the Caribbean?
So our first, if I could just go back a bit, Trinidad, for instance, so I'll talk about Trinidad primarily because that's where I'm based. The first oil rig that was established in the world was established in Trinidad.
Wow.
And that was in the 1850s. We have been producing oil here since commercially. So this is on the commercial side of it since 1908. And at one stage, we had the biggest, I would say, oil refinery in the Commonwealth, refining about 250,000 barrels a day. And then our prime minister, after we had a major gas find, decided to establish the gas industry. So we are one of the major exporters of methanol and ammonia in the world. In Trinidad, we also have the largest LNG, liquefied natural gas, complex in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow.
And up to 2010, 65% of the gas that was imported in the US, liquefied natural gas, came from Trinidad. Now you are a net exporter of natural gas, but back then you were importing, and the 65% of the imports came from Trinidad. So we have a well-developed energy sector, both in the oil and gas sector and the other downstream areas. In the Americas, I think we have one of the largest gas processing facilities. So in all the countries, the 35 countries in the Americas, one of the largest gas processing facilities. And Trinidad is a well-developed gas industry, a gas and oil industry, sorry, or country, I should say. And out of that, it also spawned other industries. Like, for instance, the manufacturing sector, the banking sector also became a major source of growth and revenue for the country. So you have that. And if you go up to like Jamaica, Guyana right now, Guyana has had unprecedented oil discoveries in the last few years. Shell has discovered, just Shell alone, over 11 billion barrels of oil.
That's a lot of oil. And, here in the United States, we're struggling with these energy questions like never before. It was discovered, I think, by most of us, just this year, how much oil we were buying from Russia, for instance. And a lot of Americans have concerns with that. Nigel, I'm curious, do you think that, purchasing more of the abundant oil reserves in the Caribbean could be a way for us to bring our energy purchasing back to the Western Hemisphere and closer to home?
So I think with Exxon being a US company, and I should say, apart from Guyana, we also have Suriname, which is not far from Guyana, and also part of CARICOM. They've had about 7 billion barrels, I'm saying 7,000, but 7 billion barrels of oil they also found. So with Exxon being a major player there, I think it's good news for the US. And I think being in this hemisphere, it's also good. The good thing about countries like Guyana and Trinidad, we may have small issues. Guyana had some issues after their last elections, but in terms of transfer of power, democracy, all these things are alive in the Caribbean and the countries I'm talking about in particular. So I think that augurs well for the relationship between the Caribbean and also the US. But also, I think in the whole hemisphere, there is a great need for greater collaboration. And I'm actually working on that right now, in greater collaboration among the Americas.
And Nigel, just to fill out for our audience, kind of your professional path. Where we left off, you were heading up the insurance conglomerate, the massive insurance conglomerate. But since then, you've done a whole bunch of other stuff. And I know there's probably too much to get into in detail, but could you just give us kind of the sketch of what you've been up to the past decade or so, where your major areas of focus are?
Sure. And in terms of the, so I just want to clarify, I wasn't the CEO of the entire group, just the global arm. But going back to go to your question, when I made an exit from that company, I started working as a consultant with a number of companies globally. And I made a trip to Ghana in West Africa in 2008. Ghana had just found the oil in commercial quantities and gas back then, and they looked at Trinidad as a model that they could follow. I should also mention that since 2007, we have had over 100 delegations from Africa coming to Trinidad to look at our gas model, to duplicate it. And so I worked with companies as a consultant in various areas all around the world. And that has been a great experience. Since 2017, I started working in the whole relief and recovery area. And that came about, I shouldn't say by chance, maybe by divine intervention. After Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017, I started a massive mobilization of business leaders and organizations to support those islands that were affected. And how I started doing that is the countries where I spent some time as a mission, they were affected. And when I saw Irma was the biggest hurricane to ever form out in the Atlantic. And when I saw that monster hurricane barreling towards those islands, I was concerned. And my concern then turned to action. I called the then chairman of the World Bank Small States Forum, who was the Prime Minister of Grenada, and we decided to come up with a plan. We came up with a plan to support those islands. That then, so it was a massive mobilization effort. We got over 80 containers, we got cars, we rebuilt schools, we rebuilt homes, and the community that I belong to, we also got some of the members of that community, to go into Dominica, and they spent about 2.5 years working on the ground with people in need. And that is through an organization I formed in 2007, which is a division of that same community, Living Water Community. It's Mercy Foundation. So through the Mercy Foundation, we went into the islands, worked with them, and we also, not only did we work with them, but we also brought in some contractors to rebuild homes, schools, etc. That led into a lot of work globally in this area. But I'll stop there for now, and if you have more questions, I would certainly be willing to answer them.
Yeah, this is interesting, and I mean, one of the things that I know about you, Nigel, as our friendship has grown over the past year, is that I consider you what we call in America, a super connector. I mean, it just seems like you know people all over the world, and you're able to quickly form coalitions and groups that are working on important projects, be it in business or philanthropy or a hybrid of both. Is that always how you've been? Or are you just kind of wired to bring people of goodwill together and join forces and create these initiatives?
So I'll tell you, a friend of mine told me recently, a friend of mine from the US, she said to me, I see why you connect or you network so well. You came from a family of 10 children. So I had a good laugh with that one. But I think, relationships are very important to me. And that has been one of the ways that I connect, through the relationships that I've built. So I build relationships, and not only at those levels, but I would go to the grocery, for instance, and the guys who are packing, I build a relationship with them over time. So relationships are key and very important. And through those relationships, I have a saying, you never know where a relationship takes you. So I would meet someone and we start a relationship, and then it just leads from one thing to the other. But I'll tell you what, there is a saying that, there's 6 degrees of separation. I think if you really work your relationships, you'll find that there are about 1 or 2 degrees of separation. So an example would be getting involved in the initiative I just spoke about, which is after Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2019, when Dorian struck the Bahamas, and it was the Secretary General of the UN said it was a hurricane, a category hell hurricane. It was so devastating. While I was driving to the airport, I put together a WhatsApp group of over 250 leaders. My wife was driving, I should say. I was the passenger. And that started a massive mobilization to support the Bahamas. And an official from the World Bank said to me then that they had never seen anything like that. And they suggested that we use it as a prototype for disasters. And those things would lead from one thing to the next. So that, and I will shortly share with you how that has really brought about so many different initiatives from just a WhatsApp group, bringing people together, and that started off, as I indicated, with the last initiative for Irma and Maria. And John, I would tell you, when I started those initiatives, I did not know what I was doing. I just felt something saying to me, and maybe it's the Holy Spirit, do this. And I went ahead, I did it, and then it led one thing to the next in a very positive way.
Amazing. So talk to us about what it's like, organizing a massive kind of grassroots from scratch initiative to respond to a disaster. I mean, take the Irma catastrophe, for instance. Will you just walk us through, what that was like, getting that group together and trying to make an impact on behalf of the people that were devastated by that storm?
Yeah, so I'll give you both examples. One would be in Irma, what I did after I spoke to the Prime Minister, because I must say I was feeling a bit down when I saw Irma heading towards the islands and then the destruction and the devastation. And I had experienced personally when I was a missionary, Hurricane Louis, which then was the worst hurricane to hit St. Martin. Irma surpassed it. I left St. Martin 2 days before the hurricane to go to a conference in Trinidad. And when I returned, I could not fathom the devastation and the destruction. So when I saw Irma coming to the islands, I felt a little bit down. And in 24 to 48 hours, I called the Prime Minister and we started this mobilization. What I did then is called a meeting of business leaders and organizations. And what we started then was the massive mobilization. We got people who started donating mattresses, foodstuff, transport, cars, ships, to take stuff, shipping companies, etc., to take containers. And it was so well coordinated and organized, and people giving their time freely. That led to us doing it when we had the worst floods in Trinidad in 2018. And then, as I indicated, our WhatsApp group in 2019. In 2019, for Dorian, through our coordination and the efforts, we were able to, we had over 100 airlifts. And Operation Barbecue Relief, which is the largest mass feeding organization in the US. I was the one thing, again, networking. Someone connected me to the CEO there, and they moved all their equipment. Well, I shouldn't say all, but equipment from the Midwest. And I have pictures of that. It was wonderful. They moved it down to Miami, and every day cooked 10,000 meals, airlifted it, worked with the churches and the communities on the ground, and just distributed meals to 10,000 people. Another thing would be doctors. We had various organizations who brought doctors, and they came in through the coordination again, set up makeshift clinics, and were able to go to those most in need. It was an incredible, I would say, show of humanity, if you want to use that term.
Nigel, just going back to your foundations, faith, family, hard work. You're a devout Catholic. You love Jesus Christ. You love Mary. It's such a big part of who you are. What did that mean to you? How did you feel when you saw the impact of the organization you built up from scratch, seeing those doctors airlifted into the region, the food being distributed, the people given shelter? Describe how you felt when you were watching that impact.
And John, I am going to send you, I probably have not as yet, but I'll send you a documentary we did following Irma and Maria. And there was one clip in particular. There was this nun who lost, she was the principal of the school, and the school was destroyed from the hurricane. And then the bishop Gabriel Malzier, who is now the chair of the bishop of the Antilles region, so all the countries in the Caribbean. She said when he came to her and told her that, we're going to rebuild those schools, words could not express how she felt. And that was so for many people who these groups, these individuals, these organizations reached out to, the joy that they would feel after such destruction and devastation and catastrophe. People coming to them now, and I would go back to the scripture reading. You know, when I was hungry, when I was thirsty, when I was in prison, etc. You know, that very familiar scripture passage. When you do this to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do it to me.
You know, Nigel, a lot of busy people say, you know, I'm just so focused with all the things going on in life, you know, working my job, working my business. I have children, you know, I mean, just, you know, people say they're so busy right now. But I mean, you're a busy man. You have a huge family. You have big businesses, plural, to run, you know, all over the world. But you still made time to make this massive impact. What advice would you give to people that want to do more philanthropy, that want to perform more charitable acts, but feel like they just don't have the time with everything else going on?
So I think that there are ways that you could do it, John. Certainly for those who have the financial means, get involved with a charity that, you know, you may not have the time, but you may have the means financially. I think if you find that charity that you're comfortable with, donate to that charity. That's one thing. The other thing is in small ways. Like, one of the things that the pandemic has shown us is that there are so many people now who are in need, and you may find right in your neighborhood, there may be people who are in need. And I think just maybe buying some extra food for a family, I think that could have a big impact. Maybe adopt a family. And when I say adopt, I mean every month as you go to the grocery store, make sure you find that family in need and purchase extra groceries for that family. I think those small things could have a tremendous impact on people's lives.
So Nigel, at this point, you and your organization, your coalition, have responded with great impact to a number of natural disasters. I'm curious, do you feel like you have kind of created, you know, a little bit of a, I guess, a template or a manual of how to respond to these types of episodes in the future? So, for instance, if a hurricane struck the Caribbean this upcoming hurricane season, do you feel like with all the lessons and the efficiencies that you've learned over these past disasters, you would be ready to respond, you know, with all those lessons learned and all those connections in place?
And I would say, because of the success of the interventions for Hurricanes Irma, Maria, Dorian, what has happened now is people reach out to us. So like when you had the earthquake in St. Vincent and the Grenadines last year, we formed a global coalition, but the global coalition is the same players from the last two disasters. And on an official basis, both the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the chairman of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, that was actually, the St. Vincent is in the Eastern Caribbean. They both officially appointed me as the leader of a global coalition to support St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Then we had the earthquake in Haiti, and the same thing happened, you know?
So, Nigel, one thing that we hear a lot from American philanthropists and people with the means to make a difference in these types of situations is, I'm anxious about making a contribution because I want to make sure it's being used for the right purpose. I most recently saw this with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. A lot of American philanthropists and people of charity that I'm connected to, you know, were wondering where they could, you know, send money, you know, to make a difference, to help the people of Ukraine, to alleviate the suffering as a result of the war there. What tips or advice would you give to Americans with big charitable hearts and the means to make financial contributions as they evaluate where to direct those dollars to have the greatest impact?
I would say get with charities who, you know, charities that I would say authentic. And then the other thing would be, so there are many organizations, when you give donations, there's a huge administrative cost. And I would say look for charities. So like when we do the work that we do, we align ourselves with charities. So I'll give an example. When we worked on Irma Maria or Dorian, what we did is we got a coordinating organization, and every dollar that was put towards these efforts went to that organization. So none came to us. So every dollar that you donated, it did not come to our accounts. It went to the charity or the coordinating charity. And I don't want to say I know Living Water, so hence the reason why I'm using that example. They're well known. They have the internal structures in place. So an organization like Living Water, or there are others also, I'm sure. I think you need to look at the charity, the background, the people who are behind it, the internal structures that they have, and just make sure that the funds that you're sending getting to the people who need it the most.
Very well said. So shifting gears a little bit, let's talk business. You are leading a number of different companies, involved in different companies. What are your major areas of focus right now in your professional life, Nigel?
So in terms of, I have three organizations. One is an organization where a lot of the work that we do, like the one that I just mentioned in terms of the hurricane relief, we also do a lot of leadership conferences, forums, etc. And that is through the Global Business Leadership Forum. So that's an organization I founded about 6 years ago. And when I left my former company, I always felt I wanted to build a similar type company focused on energy and other main areas like tech, real estate, etc. I finally got the opportunity to do that in the last year, and I've brought on board some really powerful people. And when I say powerful, leaders in the area, like for instance, Liz Kulik, who leads our real estate division. Liz has done over $100 billion in real estate projects globally, including working on major cities. They're doing the master planning. So Liz is leading up that initiative with me and for me. And then in the energy sector, we have a lot of great energy professionals here in Trinidad. So we are teaming up with energy professionals in the US, in other parts of the Americas, in Africa, in Asia, and also in the United Arab Emirates to do energy projects. And there is, obviously we are moving, we have an energy transition that is taking place, but I think we would be fooling ourselves to think that the energy transition is going to take us fast as some people think it could happen. It's not going to happen that quickly. So I think what we need to do is to be smart about this. And as we go through that energy transition, do it in a way that is very strategic, but it's not going to happen overnight. So what I've done is brought together different persons from the energy sectors with different skill sets. And what we are doing now is looking at projects in the region and in the Americas, in Africa, and other parts of the world. So those are two main areas. The last one is really in health initiatives. So with the pandemic, we're working with like the UN, the Pan American Health Organization, the WHO, etc. We looked at ways or areas where there are gaps, and we're now trying to fill those gaps. So like, for instance, in clinical trials, there's really, in clinical trials, you don't have as much of a wide cross-section as you could have undergoing clinical trials. So what we are doing now is setting up hubs in the Caribbean and in other parts of the developing world to do clinical trials.
Fascinating. Let's focus in on the energy piece real quick. Here in the United States, consumers are paying the highest prices they've ever paid for gasoline. Other energy commitments like home heating and cooling are high as well, some of the highest prices we've ever seen. So it's a hot topic here in the United States. I mean, you're deeply engaged in that sector, and you have for your entire career. You mentioned that you envision the transition occurring a little bit more gradually. Just forecast that for us for a little bit. I mean, what's the balance of this decade, the 2020s, look like? When do you think we'll see kind of a zero carbon or near zero carbon environment? I mean, just kind of cast the vision forward and tell us from Nigel's desk how you see this playing out, specifically in terms of the transition that we all anticipate.
So I would tell you what we need to have, first of all, is what I suggest, I wouldn't say but a balance. Because what we have is we have the climate activists, which is fine because they're doing their jobs, but we go to one extreme and then you have the other extremes. And I think what we need to do is have a meeting of the minds in the middle. And I think that is the key thing here. If we could get people who are on both sides of the fence really coming together and looking at what's in the best interest, not only for our planet, but also for the people in the planet. You know, I remember once a friend of mine telling me that when you are the captain of a ship, you have to be interested in two things. Not only you have to be interested in the ship, but you also have to be interested in the crew. So I think it's important for us to be smart about this and to strike a balance so that we are not going to extremes. Because what I find happens a lot now, and I don't want to get too preachy, but I think we seem to be going into too many extremes. And I think what we need to start doing is getting the various parties to speak.
Yeah, absolutely, and of course that's exactly what you're doing. So you're practicing what you're preaching. What emerging technologies and energy excite you, Nigel? I mean, what developments, what cutting edge, bleeding edge breakthroughs are you tracking that we all should be paying attention to in terms of development of alternative energy and the transition?
So I would say one key area is certainly um, hydrogen, the whole area of the hydrogen area. Um, you know, hydrogen I think is the a fuel of the future. And so we are doing right now in Trinidad, there's a major project in the hydrogen sector, and you have a few taking place throughout Latin America, also in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, and also in North America. So I think hydrogen is certainly going to be one of the fuels of the future.
And which ones are you somewhat skeptical of? I mean, like here in the United States, there's a lot of debate over all the practicalities around solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, et cetera. Are there any technologies that you are a little bit concerned about or a little bit skeptical of in terms of their broad applicability and practicality?
I wouldn't say skeptical, but I would say I think in terms of wind, we haven't figured it out as yet. And I think we need to get it right. Because what happens again, sometimes with the activists, and this is, so hear me clearly, I'm not trying to bash the activists, but sometimes we get so militant about a cause that we are not looking at it from a broad spectrum. And I think it's really important for us to look at things from in a more, I would say, with an open mind. Like for instance, with the whole transition from oil to gas, it's not going to happen as fast. And now we are seeing with the problems with Ukraine and Russia, we are seeing where, let's say we had really decided to phase out oil. I don't know where we'd be now as a planet. So I think it's important for us to have an open mind and to have discussions that I go back to that, what I just mentioned about the ship and also the crew. You know, we have to be interested in both sides. And we need to look at it from a holistic perspective. Let me put it that way.
You know, Nigel, one of the things I think is really interesting about you, if we could just talk about, I guess philosophy and personalities a little bit, is like you're a man of great principle. I mean, you certainly have strong beliefs and commitments both in your personal life and your professional life, but you also seem to have this amazing ability to collaborate really effectively with different kinds of people. You know, that see the world differently or come from a different background or aren't necessarily aligned with your worldview, et cetera. I mean, what's the secret to that? It seems like a lot of people have trouble with that, just really being a part of a coalition or a group with a lot of different kinds of people, but driving towards a common objective. How talk to us about why that comes so naturally to you.
You know, the thing with it, so John, I'll tell you, I think people need to talk.
Yeah.
And when I say talk, I don't mean just coming to a conversation or coming to the table with your preconceived ideas, etc. Come to the table, have discussions, and if you can't resolve, come back again to the table and find a way to work things out. I am a person, I believe in consensus, I believe in building consensus, I believe in consultation, but I also believe in making decisions. And sometimes when you get to that point of making decisions, you have to make that decision that you think is in the best interest of all, even if everyone doesn't agree with you. So I think it's important to have discussions, to talk, to get together and really try to resolve the issues. Now, and why I'm saying issues, I think in the world now we have some major issues, major challenges, but I just don't find we're talking enough. So you'd find you have people on the left, people on the right, and we are not talking. We are not talking. I think it's important for us to talk and to also look at what the objectives, what are the goals, what are the objectives, what is the bigger picture here? So I think we have lost that sense of the big picture.
That's really well said. And in terms of the big picture, I mean, you're a man of international institutions. You've traveled and done business everywhere on our planet. You've seen a lot of these, I guess, international groups form up, NGOs, international cooperative organizations. Some work well and some don't. Here in the United States, there's been a lot of concern about, some of these international organizations and if they actually even have a purpose anymore, or if they're efficient use of resources. Tell us a little bit about how you evaluate an NGO, an international organization, in terms of its effectiveness. When you see one that you think is functioning really well, one that you'd want to be involved in or invest in, what are the characteristics of that organization that you look for?
So I would think the key thing is people. If the organization is about people and the welfare, the well-being of people, I think that is the key there. Because what has happened with a lot of major organizations, and what I'm saying here might be controversial, is that humanitarian organizations, some of them are not about humanity anymore. It's about administration. And they've become so thick with layers and layers of bureaucracy. And then they lose the focus of why they were originally formed, or the foundation of the organizations. And we see that in so many different areas. But I think once you start losing your focus, which should be people, I think that is when the organization no longer is serving those who it was created to serve. So I think so your question was, how do I evaluate? I think once an organization, the central focus is people, I think that is the key there, and that is important.
And along the lines of people, Nigel, I mean, you've had the privilege of leading and managing teams throughout your career, hundreds of people, I'm sure, from different backgrounds, different parts of the world, different nationalities, highly skilled people, high educated people, high performing people. What are some of your leadership or management principles that you've employed to be such an effective leader in business?
So one would certainly be integrity. I think it's important to have integrity. I think honesty, mutual respect is very important, having that mutual respect, and seeing people as, I mentioned people before, but equality, I think, is so important. I think those are some of the driving forces or factors. And obviously my faith again. I would go back to what I would consider the roots, which is my faith.
Here in the United States, there's ongoing conversations about how to provide, a professional environment where people can thrive and achieve great results and contribute to the success of a firm or a company while balancing family obligations. That's been a big theme of the Faith and Finance Forum show throughout from our inception. How do you work that, Nigel? I mean, members of your team that have families, have children, and all the obligations and responsibilities and gifts that come along with that. How do you create a culture in your companies where a team member or a team leader knows that he or she will be able to be there for their families and achieve great results at your company?
Family first. So I would say family first. If you family is first, and I'll tell you something, John, when people know that you have their interest at heart, you get a lot more from them than if they're seeing themselves as just an instrument for you to get to your goals and objectives. And so I have the saying, which is people before profits. And I think if you stay true to that concept, which is people before profits, or people, you could say people profits through people, but in a very positive way. I think once people know that you have their interests at heart, they will give you 100%.
That's amazing. How do you go about a professional search? Like, for instance, when you're hiring an executive at one of your companies, talk to us a little bit about what you look for in those interviews, how you develop your candidate list. Executive recruiting, high-level recruiting is of high interest to listeners of the show.
So I would say certainly family. So you look at a person's background and their family life, etc. So I think family would be a key thing. And for some people say, that's not important as long as a person is performing. But I think it's important. I think the person's family life would be a key factor. I think honesty, integrity, the other things that I mentioned, but a major area would be attitude. Attitude, the person's attitude would be a key factor when you determine if you want that person to be on your team.
I love it. So tapping back into your international and global view, Nigel, what are the big global, mega trends that you are paying attention to? I mean, at least from my seat, I look at, the recent instability of financial markets, especially here in the United States, where the stock market is at, the United States dollar, the key sectors of our economy, inflation is at a record high in this country right now. Around the world, I mean, it seems like instability is on the rise, particularly the situation in Eastern Europe with Russia and Ukraine. Just give us your worldview. What big trends, what big themes are you tracking on behalf of your clients and the organizations you lead?
So I think the ESG is a key one. So I think ESG for sure. More and more companies are looking at that whole area of the environment. They're looking at governance. They're looking at those areas. So I think that is one key area. We need to keep our eyes on Russia and Ukraine, because that situation could, two things could happen. Is it could be resolved, or it could really get worse than it is. I'm hoping for the best with that situation. The pandemic, when the OECD did and when they did some an analysis, the world was could have lost as much as $12 trillion, the global economy, through the pandemic. And that for us was and it continues to be a very difficult and challenging time. We certainly did not need Russia and Ukraine following right after the pandemic. So I think we are in for a bumpy ride, or maybe a rough ride in the coming years. But I'm hoping that, as we as Christians, we live in hope. I'm hoping that out of that, we'll have, because we've seen this throughout history, out of that, I'm hoping for a new era.
Beautifully said. And it's always darkest before the dawn, as they say. And, Nigel, you've spent so much of your career, in the developing world, in Latin America, Africa. What's the future look like for those regions of the world? I mean, we've seen really strong growth, particularly in Africa, in recent years. Do you anticipate that will continue? What should our listeners know about the economic outlook throughout the developing world specifically?
In terms of Africa, there are lots of good signs, and there were better signs prior to COVID-19. In 2000, a piece was written in The Economist, and they refer to Africa as the failed continent. In 2010, 10 years after, they were saying Africa rising, because you've had so many, like a lot of the dictators were no longer in power, and a lot of the countries were moving towards democracies, which was a great sign. And then you have this increased middle class. So a lot of that took place in Africa in the recent past. I think with the pandemic, you've seen a slump in the economies, but I'm hoping that we will have that bump that takes those economies back to pre-pandemic days. In terms of Latin America and the Caribbean, we were affected by the pandemic in terms of food security, and like other regions, education. One of the areas we have to keep an eye on is education, because at one stage we had 1.6 billion children and young people out of school during the pandemic, which is a huge number of young people and children. And I think what I've seen it, this is a discussion I have with my wife, the anxiety that children have faced because they're no longer able to go out as they were going out before, the anxiety with masks, it's general anxiety that took place, and children they did not react as we would as adults. It's a different thing to them, because they're carefree, they go out, etc. So I think it's going to take some time for us to get back to that point where our children could get away from that anxiety. And the other thing is that they've become more they were indoors for such a long time that they got more into their devices, their computers, their phones, etc. How do we get children to socialize again? How do we get them to get out and do activities? Because they've now gotten accustomed to staying home with their devices. So I think we are in for, and it's not that I'm strained, but I think we are in for a very difficult period in getting back to a state of normalcy where we don't have all these social anxieties, which then has a ripple effect in other areas of our lives. But in terms of Africa and the Caribbean, I see, we've had that slump, but I'm hoping we could get that bump to take us back to where we were pre-pandemic days.
Nigel, most of our listeners here on the Faith and Finance Forum are familiar with the impacts of COVID-19 on the West, North America and Europe. We all track that pretty closely. I'm not sure people are as familiar with the way COVID-19 impacted, say, Africa. Would you talk about, what Africa has been like in the past couple of years, specifically vis-a-vis the COVID-19 phenomenon?
So one of the areas that we had a major challenge with is getting vaccines. Because what happened, and I just need to say it as it is, we had the pharmaceutical companies, the vaccines went to a lot of first world countries. So we did not have vaccines coming to us as we wanted them to, or as we would have liked it to, I should say. So we had that issue with vaccine, what I would refer to as inequity. We had a disparity, and that was one area. But in terms of other things, like for instance, I mentioned food security. Food security is a major issue, a major challenge for the developing world. And it has become even more challenged now with the pandemic and the situation in Russia and Ukraine has exacerbated that issue or that problem.
Nigel, this just sprang to my mind, just again, because of your familiarity with Africa, in particular, when you look at population demographic studies, there's parts of the world that are, exploding in population. Some, are growing much less quickly, obviously. But Africa is a place where the population is exploding. Asia as well, Latin America, not to the same degree, but still growing. Are you somebody that is concerned about growing populations, global populations? Do you see that as a threat, or do you see it as even an opportunity or something that has a lot of upside too? It seems like there's a broad range of opinion on that, but you've seen the parts of the world up close that are exploding in population. I'm interested in your take on that.
Interesting, because some experts are saying it's not a good thing, others are saying it is a good thing. So you have populations like, for instance, in our country, Trinidad, we have an aging population. So we're going to have major challenges with the workforce, etc. And you find that in other parts of the world. But in Africa, for instance, in many ways that the growing population will benefit that country in a lot of ways, in positive ways. So I think it's really 6 of one, half a dozen of the other,
No, it's just interesting. I mean, you're so intimately familiar with that. I want to get your take on that. Well, listen, as our time starts to wind down a little bit, just give our listeners and viewers, a few final thoughts. What's your general, projection in terms of the global economy and the places you're interested in for the rest of this year, for the next couple of years? You're a good predictor of forthcoming events, Nigel. So we want to tap into your expertise. What should we be looking out for in the balance of 2022 and beyond?
So, John, with every challenge that comes or every problem, I think there's an opportunity. I sincerely believe that there's an opportunity with every challenge that we are presented with. And I think the challenges that we are presented with now, I think there's an opportunity here for us to really come together to build corridors of trade, to build corridors of technology, to build corridors of food security between the developed world and the developing world. I think there's a great opportunity for greater collaboration, for greater cooperation, and really bringing the world together in a much more, I would say, the word I'm looking for the right word here to say it, to end off this part here. But I think what we need is a greater sense of collaboration and cooperation among all peoples. And I think if we're able to achieve this, and I think it's within our grasp, more so than ever, because technology has been the great equalizer. We have a great equalizer that connects us all now. I am talking to you here, and I think you're right next door. I think you're right here with me. We have virtual meetings now with people from all over the world. That was unheard of even 2 years ago. We do it through Skype and different things, but now we're in this, virtually we could meet. So I think there's a huge opportunity now for us to build these corridors for a better world.
No, I think that's so beautifully said, Nigel. You're right. I mean, because of these technologies, communication technologies specifically, people can form friendships across continents and hemispheres like they never could be before, and that provides amazing opportunities in business and in our faith. And I think that's a beautiful point to kind of wrap things up on. Nigel, where can our listeners and viewers go to learn more about you, the initiatives that you're involved in? I know a lot of people are going to want to get to know you better after listening to this show.
So sure, we are right now redoing all our websites. But if you go on Facebook, you would find me. We have a few websites, we have a few Facebook pages, but we are now doing a total overhaul. And I think in the next month, we'd have all our websites, all our LinkedIn pages, all our social media up and running. But for now, you'd get me on Facebook.
That's perfect. Nigel Salina has been with us on the Faith and Finance Forum, hosted by the Catholic Finance Association, presented by Aquinas Wealth Advisors. We've been talking about faith, family, hard work, and making a global impact with our great friend Nigel today. Thank you all for being on the Faith and Finance Forum show. Nigel, God bless you and all our friends in the Caribbean and Trinidad, and we'll see you next time on the Faith and Finance Forum. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.